Everything will be fine, don't you worry. Good morning, Mama. Good morning, Mama.
If you've ever searched for a house with your last savings in your hand, then you already know that desperation can make strangers look like angels. But what if the smiling landlord collecting your rent wasn't a landlord at all? What if every key he handed over opened nothing but another person's nightmare? And what if the price of every lie he told wasn't paid by the victims, but by his own child? Stay with me until the end, because this story proves that sometimes justice doesn't knock on your door, it breaks it down. And if you enjoy stories that reveal the hidden consequences of greed, take a second to subscribe. You never know which story might change the way you see the world. The first time anyone met Kareem Lawal, they trusted him. He had the kind of smile that calmed nervous people. He dressed neatly in crisp native attire during the weekends and clean shirts during the week. He greeted elderly women respectfully. He laughed easily with security guards and shop owners. He knew everybody's names around Mokola in Ibadan. Nobody imagined that the man shaking their hands had stolen millions from people who could barely afford breakfast. Karim wasn't born evil. His father had been a bus driver who died after years of struggling with illness. His mother sold bean cakes every morning before sunrise, just to feed her 3 children. Karim grew up promising himself one thing: I will never be poor. It sounded like determination. Over the years, it quietly became an obsession. He tried honest jobs. He sold phone accessories, he worked as an office assistant, he even became an estate agent's messenger. That last job changed everything. He discovered something most people never realized. People looking for houses were desperate, very desperate. Young couples, students, widows, families escaping terrible landlords, workers transferred from another city. All of them carried cash. All of them were willing to believe good news, and all of them hoped they were finally meeting an honest agent. Karim watched experienced fraudsters operate without lifting a weapon. They simply collected inspection fees, collected agreement fees, collected caution deposits, collected rent, then disappeared. Sometimes victims were too embarrassed to report them. Sometimes they couldn't afford lawyers. Sometimes the fake agents had already changed phone numbers. It looked easy, too easy. When the company eventually dismissed Karim for secretly collecting unauthorized inspection money from clients, he didn't feel ashamed. He felt inspired. This business belongs to whoever is bold enough, he told himself. Within 6 months, he had created fake documents, fake company stamps, and business cards carrying the name of a real estate company that had closed 3 years earlier. Nobody questioned it. The logo looked real. The receipts looked professional. His confidence completed the illusion. Soon, money flowed into his pockets like rainwater during the wet season. Every week brought fresh victims. One afternoon, a young Hausa school teacher named Hafsat Musa arrived from Kano after receiving a teaching appointment in Ibadan. She had spent years saving every extra naira she earned. Inside her handbag was almost everything she owned. She met Karim through an online advertisement. He welcomed her warmly. "Madam, you are lucky. That apartment should have been taken yesterday." Her eyes brightened. "Really?" "Yes, but the owner traveled unexpectedly. If you pay today, I'll reserve it immediately." She hesitated. "Can I see the landlord?" Karim smiled confidently. "He's abroad. I manage all his properties." Everything sounded believable. He even drove her to a neat apartment. He already knew the security guard there. He greeted him loudly. "How are you, Baba?" The old man smiled back without suspecting anything. Hafsat walked through the rooms. The walls were freshly painted. The windows worked. The neighborhood felt peaceful. She imagined decorating the sitting room. She imagined calling her mother with good news. Without another question, she transferred an entire year's rent, nearly every kobo she possessed. Kareem printed a receipt immediately. "Congratulations," he said warmly. "You'll collect the keys tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. By morning, his phone was switched off. His office had vanished. Even the plastic signboard hanging outside the rented shop had disappeared overnight. When Hafsat returned to the apartment crying, the real caretaker looked confused. "What receipt?" She showed him. His face changed. "My daughter, this house already has tenants." Her knees weakened. She couldn't even cry anymore. She simply sat on the ground staring into empty space. The caretaker slowly understood. Another fake agent. Again. Across the city, the same story repeated itself over and over. A mechanic from Zaria, a newly married Yoruba couple, a pregnant woman relocating from Abeokuta, a retired civil servant. Every one of them believed they had finally found a home. Instead, they found shame, debt, hopelessness. Meanwhile, Kareem's own life became richer by the day. He bought a black SUV, moved into a luxurious duplex, joined expensive social clubs. His neighbors admired him. "What business are you doing?" He laughed smugly. "Real estate." Nobody asked further. Money answers many questions before they are spoken. His wife, Kareem Lawal, noticed changes she couldn't explain. They had married when Kareem still struggled to pay transport fare. She knew his old salary. She knew mathematics. The numbers no longer matched. One evening, she placed food on the dining table before speaking quietly. "Kareem, where exactly is all this money coming from?" He barely looked up from his phone. "Business. What business grows this fast?" He sighed dramatically. "Must every blessing become an investigation? I'm your wife, and I'm providing." She looked at him for several seconds. Providing isn't the same as being honest. His smile disappeared. He stood slowly. "You enjoy this house?" "Yes." "You enjoy driving the new car?" "Yes." "Our son attends the best school?" "Yes." "Then stop asking questions whose answers will only disturb your peace." Those words settled inside her heart like cold stones. She stopped asking. Not because she believed him, because she feared the truth. Their 6-year-old son, Yusuf, adored his father. Every evening he waited by the gate. The moment Kareem's SUV appeared, the little boy ran laughing into his arms. "Daddy, my champion." Sometimes, Kareem forgot every lie he'd told during the day. Holding Yusuf made him feel a good man. Children have a strange way of hiding our worst sins from ourselves. For a few minutes, he truly believed he deserved happiness. Then another phone rang. Another victim. Another payment. Another lie. Months passed. The list of victims became too long to count. Some borrowed money from relatives. Some sold family land. One elderly widow developed high blood pressure after losing her savings. Another victim postponed life-saving surgery because her rent money disappeared into Kareem's account. Still, he slept peacefully. Whenever guilt approached, he silenced it with luxury. A bigger television, another designer wristwatch, a family vacation, expensive perfumes. He convinced himself everyone was responsible for protecting themselves. If they're foolish enough to trust strangers, he often said, that's their problem. But someone had started paying attention. Not a victim, not the police, someone far quieter. A soft-spoken Yoruba journalist named Femi Adeoye had been investigating fake housing scams for nearly a year. he noticed something unusual. Different victims, different neighborhoods, different phone numbers. Yet, every fake receipt carried tiny similarities. The same printing style, the same spelling mistake hidden in the agreement papers, the same signature. Different names, same handwriting. Femi smiled to himself. "You are clever," he whispered, "but not clever enough." Instead of publishing immediately, he continued digging, because he had a feeling this wasn't one fraudster. It was something much bigger. And he was right. Femi resisted the temptation to publish a sensational headline. If he exposed only one fake agent, another would simply replace him. He wanted the entire network. For weeks, he became invisible. He sat inside crowded roadside restaurants pretending to read newspapers while secretly watching men who called themselves estate agents. He spent hours at cyber cafes where fake tenancy agreements were printed. He spoke to victims who still trembled with anger months after losing their savings. Most refused to show their faces. The shame was too much. A young mother wiped tears from her eyes. "My twins slept inside a church hall for 3 nights because I gave our rent money to the wrong person." Every story ended the same way. A phone switched off, an office emptied overnight, a smiling agent who vanished into thin air. Then, one victim handed Femi something unusual. "I don't know if this matters." She produced a small envelope. Inside was a photocopy of the fake agent's identity card. The name printed on it was Kabiru Sani. Femi smiled. It matters. 2 days later, another victim produced another ID card. Different name, Sunday Akin. Same photograph. The beard was slightly different. The hairstyle had changed, but the eyes never lied. Femi leaned back in his chair. "So, you've been changing names." He pinned every photograph on a board inside his small office. Kabiru, Sunday, Bashir, Kunle, Ibrahim, Tayo. Different identities, one face, one man, Kareem Lawal. The investigation became personal. Meanwhile, Kareem believed life had finally rewarded him. His bank accounts overflowed. He purchased land on the outskirts of the city. He even began attending charity events. Whenever cameras appeared, he donated bags of rice, school uniforms, wheelchairs. People praised his generosity. What a kind man. What a successful businessman. What a blessing to society. He loved hearing those words. Each compliment buried his conscience a little deeper. One Sunday after prayers, an elderly imam approached him. "Kareem." "Yes, Baba." The old man smiled kindly. "Wealth is a visitor." Kareem nodded politely. "It never stays forever." "I understand." "No." The imam looked directly into his eyes. "I don't think you do." For the first time in months, Kareem felt strangely uncomfortable. He laughed it off. By evening, he had forgotten the conversation. But the words refused to forget him. Wealth is a visitor. It never stays forever. That same week, another family walked into his rented office. A Yoruba mechanic named Gobolahon. His wife, Rabi, a quiet Hausa woman. Their little daughter, barely 5 years old, clung to her mother's wrapper while hugging a worn teddy bear. They had spent 6 years saving for a decent apartment. Kareem welcomed them warmly. "You've come at the perfect time." He spread several photographs across his desk. This one just became available. The couple stared in amazement. "It looks beautiful." "It is. But there are already 3 interested families." The familiar pressure, the familiar lie. Gobolahon and Rabi exchanged worried glances with his wife. "We don't want to lose it." Kareem nodded sympathetically. "I understand." Within 30 minutes, they transferred everything. Rent, agreement fee, commission, caution deposit, inspection fee. Nearly every naira they possessed. As they stood to leave, their daughter smiled at Kareem. "Uncle, thank you." Her innocent voice caught him off guard. He froze. The little girl reached into her tiny bag. "I drew this." She handed him a folded piece of paper. Inside was a child's drawing, a smiling house, a father, a mother, a little girl holding balloons. Above them she had written, in shaky handwriting, "Our new home." Kareem stared at the drawing longer than he expected. Something tightened inside his chest. He almost called them back. Almost. Instead, he folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his drawer. By morning, he had emptied the office. Again. When Gobolahon returned with his family, the shop had become a tailoring business. The tailor looked confused. "Estate office? There has never been one here." Rabi collapsed on the pavement. Their daughter looked from one adult to another. "When are we going home?" Nobody answered. That night, Kareem couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the drawing, a smiling family, our new home. He got up around midnight, opened the drawer, stared at the picture, then locked it away again. "It'll pass," he whispered. "It always passes." But this time, it didn't. Across town, Femi finally found the breakthrough he had been waiting for. One careless mistake, one bank transfer. Unlike most victims, a university lecturer had insisted on paying electronically instead of in cash. Kareem had accepted, confident, untouchable. He simply routed the payment through an account opened under a different name. What he didn't know was that it had once been linked to an older phone number. That number had previously registered a luxury SUV, registered in Kareem Lawal's real name. Femi nearly laughed aloud. There you are. Instead of rushing to the police, he spent another week gathering evidence. Voice recordings, surveillance photographs, copies of fake agreements, bank statements, victim testimonies, everything. By the time he finished, the file was thick enough to fill a briefcase. Then fate intervened. Kareem's son Yusuf woke up one morning complaining of stomach pain. His mother assumed it was something he had eaten. Children often fell sick. She gave him warm water. By afternoon, he developed a fever. By evening, he couldn't stand. "Kareem," Zainab said anxiously over the phone, "you need to come home." "I'm in a meeting. It's Yusuf. I'll be there later." She hesitated. "No, I think you should come now." He glanced around the expensive restaurant where he was negotiating another fake property deal. A wealthy-looking client sat opposite him. This payment alone would be enormous. "I'll send money. I didn't ask for money. I'll come after I'm done." He ended the call. An hour later, Yusuf was admitted to a private hospital. Doctors suspected a severe infection. Tests began immediately. Zainab sat beside her son, holding his tiny hand. "Where's Daddy?" "He's coming." "When?" "Soon." She prayed those words were true. But Kareem was still smiling across a restaurant table, still lying, still collecting another family's future. The next morning, Femi walked into the Economic and Financial Commission office carrying his briefcase. He placed it gently on the desk. "I believe," he said quietly, "I found one of the biggest housing scammers in the Southwest." The officer opened the file. 5 minutes later, he stopped reading. He looked up. "Is all this verified?" "Every page." "And the victims?" "More than 40. The room became silent. The officer closed the file carefully. "We're going to need a warrant." For the first time in years, the walls around Kareem's perfect life had begun to crack. He simply didn't know it yet. The warrant came faster than anyone expected, not because Kareem was the biggest criminal in the country, but because his victims had become impossible to ignore. There were teachers, nurses, civil servants, market women, young graduates, retired couples. Some had borrowed money from cooperative societies. Some had taken loans they were still repaying. One family had sold their only piece of farmland, believing they were finally moving into a decent home. Every statement pointed to one man. Every document circled back to Kareem Lawal. The officers decided not to rush. Men like Kareem were slippery. If they frightened him too early, he would disappear. So they watched. For 6 days, they tracked his movements. They followed his SUV from one cafe to another. They watched him meet desperate tenants carrying envelopes of cash. One officer frowned. He never even looks guilty. Another shook his head. That's because this has become normal to him. Meanwhile, Kareem noticed something strange. Business was slowing down. People were asking more questions. Some demanded to meet property owners. Others wanted government-issued identification. He blamed social media. Too many people are becoming suspicious. His associate, a younger fraudster named Bashiru, laughed. Then we simply become smarter. Kareem smiled. We always do. But deep inside, he felt restless. That night, he arrived home unusually early. Yusuf was lying on the couch watching cartoons. The little boy looked weaker than before. His cheerful face had become pale. Kareem sat beside him. How's my champion? My tummy still hurts. You'll be fine. When? Soon. The child smiled weakly. Daddy, yes? When I get better, can we go to the zoo? Kareem laughed. Of course. You promised last time. I know. You won't forget? I won't. The boy stretched out his tiny hand. Promise. Kareem wrapped his little finger around Yusuf's. I promise. From the kitchen doorway, Zainab watched silently. She wanted to believe him. She truly did. But promises had become the easiest thing for Kareem to make. Keeping them was another matter. The following morning, Yusuf's condition suddenly worsened. His fever became dangerously high. He struggled to breathe. Doctors ordered immediate admission. Zainab called Kareem again. He answered on the third ring. I'm busy. Our son is getting worse. I'll transfer money. I don't need your money. People inside the office turned to look at her voice echoing through the hospital corridor. I need his father. I have clients waiting. Kareem, her voice cracked. Please. There was a brief silence. I'll come. He ended the call. Instead of driving to the hospital, he drove to another apartment. Another victim was waiting, a young man named Sadiq and his pregnant wife. They had traveled from Kaduna. Their landlord had given them 1 week to vacate. They had nowhere else to go. Kareem smiled as if carrying good news. I can solve your problem today. An hour later, he walked away with their savings. As he entered his SUV, his phone vibrated again. Zainab. He ignored it. It rang again. Ignored. Again, ignored. Finally, a message appeared. The doctor says come immediately. He stared at the screen for several seconds, then placed the phone face down. I'll go after one more meeting. One more meeting. Those 3 words would haunt him forever. Across town, Femi received a call from the ECFC. We're moving today. He glanced at the clock. When? Within the hour. Femi closed his notebook. After almost a year, it was over. Also, he thought, Kareem had just entered an upscale restaurant where another client waited. The man introduced himself as Al-Haji Musa, well-dressed, calm, respectful. I hear you have a duplex available. I do. The conversation flowed smoothly. Al-Haji Musa asked intelligent questions. Kareem answered confidently. Then the man smiled. I'd like to pay today. Kareem's eyes lit up. This was going to be his biggest deal in months. He produced the agreement papers. Just sign here. Instead, the man slowly reached inside his jacket. Kareem expected a check. What emerged instead was an official identity card, Economic and Financial Commission. Kareem's smile disappeared. Before he could stand, 4 officers surrounded the table. The restaurant became silent. Forks stopped moving. Conversations ended. One officer spoke calmly. Kareem Lawal. His heart began pounding. You are under arrest for obtaining money by false pretenses, conspiracy, forgery, and multiple counts of fraud. People began whispering. No. Kareem forced a laugh. This is a misunderstanding. The officer placed a thick file on the table. Inside were photographs, receipts, bank records, victim statements, his fake ID cards, even surveillance pictures of him collecting cash. His face lost all color. Where? His voice barely came out. Where did you get these? The officer smiled faintly. You've been very busy. Another officer gently took away his phone. At that exact moment, it rang. Caller ID, Zainab, and heart. The officer looked at Kareem. You can answer. His trembling fingers accepted the call. Kareem! Zainab was crying. Where are you? He couldn't finish. The doctors need you now. Yusuf is not responding to treatment. Before he could answer, an officer quietly held out the handcuffs. Metal clicked louder than the voices inside the restaurant. For the first time in years, Kareem felt truly powerless. I'll come. His voice shook. I'll come. But he couldn't. The officers led him outside. People raised their phones. Someone began recording. Others recognized him. Isn't that the famous estate consultant? So he's a scammer? I knew something was not right. His reputation collapsed in less than 2 minutes. Inside the patrol vehicle, his phone continued vibrating. Again, again, again. Then it stopped. Silence. The drive to the ECFC office felt endless. Every traffic light seemed to mock him. Every minute reminded him of one thing: Yusuf. At the hospital, doctors rushed around the small boy's bed. Machines beeped urgently. A senior consultant looked at Zainab. We're doing everything we can. She nodded through tears. Please, save my son. Outside the emergency room, she dialed Kareem's number again. This time, the phone was switched off. She didn't know it had already been taken as evidence. Back at the ECFC office, Kareem sat alone in an interrogation room. The same man who once made desperate families tremble now couldn't stop trembling himself. An investigator entered quietly. He placed a child's drawing on the table. Kareem frowned. Our new home. His breath caught. The drawing, the little girl's drawing he had hidden in his drawer. Where did you get this? We searched your office. Kareem stared at the smiling stick figures. For the first time, they didn't look happy. They looked accusing. The investigator leaned forward. Do you know what happened to that family? Kareem said nothing. They slept in a church for 5 nights. Silence. The little girl developed pneumonia. Silence. The father attempted suicide. Silence. Kareem slowly lowered his head. The investigator continued. You didn't just steal money. You stole hope. Another photograph appeared. Hafsat, the teacher from Kano. She resigned because she couldn't recover financially. Another, the elderly widow. She died 3 months later after complications from hypertension. Another, Sadiq and his pregnant wife. They lost the baby after weeks of sleeping anywhere they could find shelter. Each photograph struck harder than the last. Each face carried a wound he had never cared to imagine. Then, the interrogation room door burst open. An officer hurried inside. He whispered something into the investigator's ear. The investigator's expression changed immediately. He looked at Kareem for a long moment. Then he asked quietly, Do you have any close family besides your wife and son? Kareem frowned. What happened? The investigator didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly stood. Kareem, his voice softened. There's been an emergency at the hospital. Kareem shot to his feet so violently that the chair crashed onto the floor behind him. What emergency? The investigator remained silent. My wife called me. Tell me. Another officer stepped into the room carrying Kareem's confiscated phone. It kept ringing. Kareem reached for it instinctively. The officer didn't hand it over. You can't use it yet. My son is in that hospital. His voice cracked so loudly that people outside the interrogation room turned toward the door. My son! The investigator looked at the files spread across the table. He had questioned hardened criminals before. Drug traffickers, armed robbers, kidnappers. None of them had looked this frightened. Finally, he spoke. The hospital contacted your wife several times. Kareem swallowed hard. And? They're asking that a parent be present immediately. I am his father. You are also under arrest. The words landed like stones. No. Kareem shook his head repeatedly. No, no. He stepped closer to the investigator. I'll come back. No response. I swear I'll come back. Silence. My son needs me. The investigator looked him straight in the eye. So did every child whose parents trusted you with their rent. Kareem froze. The room became painfully quiet. The investigator wasn't shouting. He wasn't insulting. He simply spoke the truth. A truth that suddenly felt heavier than the handcuffs around Kareem's wrists. Minutes later, Kareem's lawyer arrived after receiving frantic calls from Zainab's relatives. He demanded immediate bail. The officers refused. The charges are too serious. My client's child is critically ill. We understand. Then let him go. We can't. The lawyer argued for almost an hour. Nothing changed. Because by then, more victims had begun arriving outside the office after hearing about the arrest on social media. Someone had uploaded the restaurant video. Within hours, it spread across Facebook, WhatsApp, TikTok, and X. People recognized Kareem immediately. The fake estate man has finally been caught. I knew he would never escape. He took my brother's money. He ruined my family. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became more. The EFCC compound grew crowded with angry faces carrying faded receipts and photocopies of agreements that destroyed their lives. Some cried. Some shouted. Some simply stood there staring at the building as if years of bottled pain had finally found an address. Inside, an officer looked out the window. There are too many. Another nodded. We can't release him now even if we wanted to. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the consultant walked slowly towards Zainab. She stood before him, searching his face for hope. Doctors rarely needed words. Families often understood everything before a sentence was spoken. Madame, her knees weakened. We're losing him. She covered her mouth. No, we need emergency surgery. Do it. There is one complication. What? We require the father's signed consent. She stared blankly. I'll sign. I'm sorry. The doctor shook his head gently. Legally, the rest of the sentence disappeared beneath her sobbing. She called Kareem again, switched off. Again, switched off. Again, nothing. She didn't know his phone had become evidence sealed inside a brown envelope. She looked toward the ceiling. For the first time in my life, her voice trembled. I don't know who to pray to first. Back inside the interrogation room, Kareem had stopped talking. He simply sat, motionless. The investigator returned carrying another file. This isn't about questioning you. It's about helping you understand. He opened the file. Inside were photographs of every victim whose statement had been recorded. He spread them across the table, one after the other. Teachers, drivers, students, pregnant women, old men, young couples, children, so many children. One picture showed a family sleeping beneath an unfinished building, rainwater pooled beside their mattress. Another showed a woman cooking outside a church because she had nowhere else to stay. Another showed a boy reading school books under a street light after his family became homeless. The investigator pointed quietly. Every time you stole rent, he moved to another photograph. Someone's child paid for it. Another, someone missed school. Another, someone slept outside. Another, someone went hungry. He finally reached the drawing of the smiling house. And now, he looked directly at Kareem. Your own child is paying for choices you made. Those words broke something inside him. Kareem buried his face in his hands. For years he had justified everything. They're strangers. They'll recover. Life is unfair. They should have been more careful. Every excuse collapsed at once. He remembered Yusuf's tiny finger wrapped around his own. Daddy, you won't forget. I promise. His promise broken. Again. Hours later, the court granted temporary escorted hospital visitation under heavy security because of Yusuf's critical condition. 2 officers accompanied Kareem. His wrists remained cuffed. As they entered the hospital corridor, conversations stopped. Patients looked up. Nurses whispered. Some recognized him from the viral videos. That's him, the scammer. He looks different. He looks finished. Kareem didn't hear them. He saw only Zainab. She stood outside the intensive care unit looking 10 years older than she had that morning. When she turned and saw the handcuffs, she didn't run to hug him. She didn't slap him. She simply stared, long, silent. Then her eyes filled with tears. "You came!" Her voice carried no joy, only exhaustion. Kareem nodded. "I'm sorry." She laughed. A painful laugh. "Sorry?" She stepped closer. "Our son asked for you." He lowered his head. "I know. He cried because he thought you didn't love him anymore." His shoulders trembled. You always had time for strangers with money." Each word struck harder than any prison sentence. "But when your own child needed you," she looked at the steel cuffs, "this is where your choices brought you." Neither officer interrupted. Even they looked away. The doctor approached quietly. "Mr. Lawal." Kareem looked up. "Your son is asking for you." His legs nearly gave way. The officers unlocked one cuff but remained beside him. Inside the intensive care room, machines surrounded little Yusuf. The cheerful boy who once ran laughing toward the gate looked almost unrecognizable. His breathing was shallow. His tiny face seemed too pale. Yet, when he opened his eyes, he smiled. "Daddy!" Kareem rushed to the bedside. "I'm here." "You came." "I came. I knew," he coughed weakly, "you wouldn't forget." Tears rolled freely down Kareem's face. He held Yusuf's small hand as gently as if it were made of glass. "I'm sorry." Yusuf frowned. "For what?" Kareem couldn't answer. How could he explain years of greed to a 6-year-old who believed his father was a hero? The little boy squeezed his fingers. "Daddy." "Yes, champion." "When I get better." His voice faded. "The zoo." Kareem broke down completely. He rested his forehead against the bed. "We'll go. I promise." The irony tore through him. Another promise. But this time, he didn't know whether life would allow him to keep it. Outside the room, the doctor slowly removed his glasses. He looked at Zainab with the expression every family dreads. She understood before he spoke. Her heart sank. The doctor's lips moved slowly. There was no urgency in his voice anymore. Urgency belonged to hope. This was something else. "Mrs. Lawal." Zainab clasped both hands together so tightly her knuckles turned white. "We've done everything medically possible." The corridor became strangely quiet. Even the distant sounds of nurses pushing equipment seemed to fade. "What are you saying?" The doctor's eyes glistened. "His organs are shutting down." "No." "We're very sorry." "No." She shook her head harder. "No." She pushed past him and rushed into the intensive care room. Kareem looked up just as she reached the bed. She grabbed Yusuf's tiny face between her trembling hands. "My baby!" Yusuf smiled faintly. "Mommy, I'm here." "Don't cry." She couldn't stop. "I'm not crying." "You are." He reached up weakly and wiped one tear with the back of his tiny fingers. Children always believed parents could fix everything. Parents rarely admitted when they couldn't. Yusuf looked toward Kareem. "Daddy." "Yes, champion." "You promised." His breathing became slower. "The zoo." "We'll go." "I'll ride." Another shallow breath. "The elephant." "You will." "I'll buy." His eyelids fluttered. "Ice cream." "Yes." "And." His voice almost disappeared. Can we? The monitor beside the bed let out a different sound. One long, unbroken, piercing tone. The room froze. For one impossible second, nobody moved. Then doctors rushed in. Nurse! Epinephrine! Start compressions! Kareem was pulled away from the bed. No! He struggled against the officers. My son! The doctors walked with desperate speed. 1 minute. 2. 5. Another injection. Another attempt. Another shock. Nothing. The senior consultant slowly stopped. His hands remained on the little boy's chest for a long moment. Then he looked at the clock. He quietly announced the time. Silence swallowed the room. Zainab screamed. Not the scream of surprise, the scream of a mother whose entire future had just been torn away. She collapsed beside the bed, clutching Yusuf's lifeless body. My son! She kissed his forehead again and again. Wake up! Nothing. You promised me. Nothing. Kareem! She looked up through her tears. Do something. He couldn't. For the first time in his life, money meant nothing. The luxury SUV waiting outside couldn't help. His expensive suits couldn't help. His hidden bank accounts couldn't help. The millions collected from broken families couldn't buy one more heartbeat. He fell onto his knees. The handcuffs clinked against the tiled floor. I'm sorry, he whispered to his son. I'm sorry. No answer came. The little hand that had once wrapped around his finger now lay completely still. One officer quietly removed his cap. Another looked away, blinking back tears. Death had a way of making uniforms feel very small. Hours later, the news spread. Not through television, not through newspapers, but among everyone who had known Kareem. The scammer's son has died. Some people reacted with pity. Others remained silent. A few said words that no grieving parent ever wants to hear. That's karma. The innocent paid for his sins. He harvested what he planted. Femi, the journalist, heard the news while preparing his report. He closed his laptop. For several minutes, he simply stared through the office window. His assistant looked at him. Aren't you publishing? I will, but not today. Why? Femi sighed. Justice has already begun writing today's headline. The funeral was unlike anything Kareem had imagined. He attended under heavy security because his case was already before the court. His wrists were free for the burial, but he had never felt more imprisoned. Friends who once surrounded him disappeared. Business associates switched off their phones. The men who enjoyed his expensive dinners were nowhere to be found. Only family remained. Even they struggled to look him in the eye. As Yusuf's tiny white coffin was lowered into the earth, Kareem remembered every promise he had broken. The zoo, the football match, the birthday picnic he cancelled because he had important clients, the bedtime stories postponed for one more deal, one more lie, one more victim. He realized something unbearable. He had spent years stealing homes from strangers while slowly abandoning the home that mattered most. The imam who had once warned him stepped forward after the burial. He spoke softly. I told you wealth is a visitor. Kareem nodded through tears. It left. The old man shook his head. No. His voice was filled with sadness. Wealth left long ago. He looked toward the fresh grave. You simply noticed it today. Weeks later, Kareem's trial began. The courtroom overflowed. Victims filled every seat. Some carried faded receipts. Others carried photographs of the homes they never moved into. When Kareem entered, there were no angry outbursts, only silence. Sometimes, silence is heavier than hatred. The prosecution called witness after witness. Hafsat, the teacher from Kano. She described sleeping inside a classroom because she had nowhere else to stay. Bolanyon testified next. He spoke about his daughter asking every night, "When are we going to our new house?" His voice broke before he finished. Sadiq took the stand. He couldn't complete his testimony without crying. "My wife," he paused, "lost our baby." The courtroom fell silent. Each story peeled away another layer of the man Kareem had pretended to be. When it was finally his turn to speak, he stood slowly. The judge expected excuses. The victims expected lies. Instead, Kareem looked around the courtroom. He recognized nearly every face, faces he had forgotten the moment they handed him money. Now he could never forget them. "I have no defense." People looked at one another. "I told myself that I was only stealing money." His voice shook. "I never imagined the nights people slept outside." He looked toward Bolan. "I never imagined children asking where home was." He turned toward Hafsat. "I never imagined teachers giving up their careers." Finally, he lowered his head. "And I never imagined I would one day stand beside my own child's grave, wishing I could trade every naira I stole for one more minute with him." Many victims remained unmoved. Some quietly cried. Others stared at him with empty eyes. Forgiveness, after all, cannot be demanded. It can only be offered. The judge adjusted his glasses before delivering judgment. "The harm caused in this case extends beyond financial loss." He paused. "You exploited desperation." Another pause. "You profited from trust." He looked directly at Kareem. "And you left countless families without shelter." The sentence was lengthy. Several years in prison, restitution wherever assets could be recovered, confiscation of properties bought with fraudulent proceeds. The gavel struck. It was over. Or perhaps it was finally beginning. Prison stripped away everything that had once defined Kareem. No luxury clothes, no expensive watches, no polished SUV. Just plain uniforms, concrete walls, time. Endless time. He requested books from the prison library, not about business, not about making money. Books about character, faith, integrity, restitution. He also began teaching other inmates how to read and write. One day, a young inmate proudly announced he wanted to become an estate agent after release. The room laughed. Kareem didn't. He called the young man aside. "If you ever help someone find a home," his eyes filled with tears, "remember that you are not collecting rent." The young man frowned. "What are you collecting?" "Trust." Years later, after his release, Kareem walked through the same neighborhoods where he had once driven proudly in his SUV. The luxury gone. He carried no briefcase, no fake documents, only a small bag and a heart permanently marked by loss. He stopped outside a playground. Children laughed as they chased one another. One little boy looked remarkably like Yusuf. For a brief second, Kareem smiled. Then the boy ran into another man's arms. Kareem quietly turned away. Some losses never stop hurting. Some prisons remain long after the gates open. If this story touched you, remember that greed rarely sends the bill immediately, but it always sends one. The rent Kareem thought he was collecting from desperate families was never truly his. In the end, the highest price was paid in tears, regret, and a little grave that no amount of stolen money could erase. If stories like this remind you that every choice has consequences, subscribe and join us for more powerful stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark.